welcome. We call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Jinx Aquarium Authority. Today is Tuesday, September 21st. It's 5:05 p.m. Roll call, please, Mr. Macy.
OJ?
Here.
Bonds?
Here.
Montgomery? Here. Kaylin? Murray? Here. Rowe?
Here.
Chairbox.
Here, let the record reflect that we are missing trustee Lynn. All right, business. Item number 1, consideration and appropriate action relating to a request for approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Any removals?
Second.
We have a good motion and a proper second. Let's vote, please.
OJ?
Yes.
Bonds?
Yes.
Montgomery?
Yes.
Murray?
Yes.
Rowe?
Yes.
Chairbox.
Yes. Item number 2, pulled. Item 3, number 3, award a professional design services contract for the large animal holding facility and aquarium and administrative offices building with GS Helms and Associates in the amount of $240,000. Funding for the same to be appropriated from the 2021 JAA revenue bond and budgeted to account number 90-923-5392, also known as the JAA Capital Items Building and Improvements Fund. We're on page 49, if you'd like to follow along. Mr. Carr, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the authority. The structure we're talking about has had some significant deterioration over the years because of the salt water effects on the structure. Back in March, a visual inspection was done, which is attached to your memorandum, showing some of the problems that exist there. I know back when we were expecting a snowstorm a while back, there was some real concerns about whether the roof would stand up to the weight of snow on top of it. So that was the point in time when we really started looking at what our options were. And the recommendation that was made back in March was that the building needed to be replaced with a new structure that would be designed to handle the marine environment and to do that as soon as possible. So a concept plan for the reconstruction was prepared that was presented, I think, at the last JAA meeting for your information, and it's attached also in this memorandum where the administrative offices are combined with the large animal holding or the quarantine building, whatever way you want to call it. But that would provide for consolidation of services in this building and also free up some space in the original structure that can be used for other functions such as ticketing and meetings or additional entertainment functions. So based upon the conceptual design that is shown in the packet, a cost estimate has been prepared that has recently been updated. I know that Greg Helms reached out to contractor to give him some more up-to-date present costs and then added in some contingencies, which is a good thing to do for a project of this magnitude. What we're talking about is the administrative offices, animal holding areas, cast in place concrete holding tank, locker rooms, site utilities needing to be relocated, coral lab, and on the east end of the building towards the river would be an enclosed storage area to put some of the things that shouldn't still be inside the building, keep them outside the building. The fee proposal that you have before us tonight is for the professional services for architectural, civil engineering, structural engineering, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, design services in the amount of $240,000. Greg is here if you need to ask him any specific questions about anything that's here. But our recommendation is to award this so that we can move on, get the structure designed and get it under construction as soon as possible. It's being funded out of the I changed my sheet here. The revenue bond. Yeah, the revenue bond that was passed a while ago, and because it was not included in the budget, it needs to have a supplemental appropriation. And Robert Sacedo will talk about that in the next agenda item.
How long will this work take to complete?
That's a good question. We're going to have to ask Greg that.
Any other questions for Mr. Carr? Which place is that, Cody?
Yeah, another question. We're going to end up doing this eventually here. We got to replace the buildings, but my gut tells me that's a 2-year process at least. Maybe it's a little more, maybe it's a little less, but do we need to, based on this visual inspection, spend a few dollars to stabilize this building in the meantime?
I would think that may be a possibility, but I think that's going to be a rather difficult chore to do that also. I think Greg would be another good person to ask about what might be good to do if we needed to do some stabilization. I would be concerned if we got a big heavy snowstorm, what would happen to the roof structure.
Yeah, I would too. It seems like money you don't want to spend, but you may need to spend a little just to make it safer for that interim period. Because, it does have some issues. But that's not something anybody's really looked at yet, is it?
I think, Greg, that question, which we already kind of anticipated, we were discussing it with Greg. I think that'd be great questions for him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Carr?
This is very too. When it is completed, it's in that direction. What happens to the existing building? Is it raised or?
Yeah, it gets torn down and we'll make it into additional parking.
Any other questions for Mr. Carr? Very well, Mr. Helms, if you mind, please, sir. Mr. Montgomery. Oh, you didn't have any questions for?
Questions I've already asked.
Oh, Mr. Rowe, do you have questions for Greg?
Well, let's hear these first.
Maybe just elaborate on what was asked.
Yeah, so regarding schedule, as far as developing drawings, getting ready to issue documents out to bid, I would think, 4, maybe 5 months, depending on, we have the survey already done as part of some other work. We've got to get some geotechnical work done, just to verify some foundations. But I would think, worst case, spring we can advertise and start construction as soon as you're ready. I would expect the building itself to probably not take more than a year, but I know once the building's done, there's a transition phase of moving animals from the existing facility into the new. So I don't know exactly, what that time frame is. But I would think actual construction of the new building itself.
That turn it over to the staff of the aquarium, or including that in there, for all the stuff they have to do that was built.
Now, obviously there's some things that we're gonna have to do with staff and the contractor as we go. But I would think the contractor would turn it over within a year at the most. And then depending on transferring of animals, shifting tanks and all the life support stuff that staff is going to do afterwards. I don't know exactly what that time frame would be before we'd be ready to tear down the existing building.
You can,
I guess just follow up there. There seems to be, I'm not trying to paint anything, but there seems to be a lot of different construction numbers in the information they're provided. One of your memos or letters said 3.5 to 4. I think another letter, you take 5%, it's 4.8 million. And then I think Kenny's another different memorandum said 5 million, 2.5. That was without the information. So we have a number, and I realize that's what we're trying to do is get to that number.
Right. So the very first number, the $3 to $4 million number, was when it was just the animal holding facility. That wasn't looking at the possibility of moving administration, and that was before we really started anything. That was just kind of same footprint as what was there through the past few months of kind of some preliminary work. We've made the building a little bit bigger to accommodate what really they wanted to do for the next 20 or 30 years. But the number in the most recent estimate, I think was $5.25 million. That was based on sending Magnum Construction kind of a schematic set of drawings. We've got floor plans, some basic elevations and sections, just so they could see what all was going to be necessary for that project.
Did that expand the footprint 10,000 square feet?
Yes. Right.
So what would that, what's the final size?
I think we're close to 15,000 with both stories of the admin area and the enclosed storage. Yeah, so yeah, the building has evolved since that very first.
15 to 20,000. There you go, Greg.
Okay, so this estimate,
Administrative losses, but not the piping tanks.
correct.
Now, Kenny, I know that as they develop that, are you going to also be developing a budget for what you guys need to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're going to do that in that same 4 to 5 month time?
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's going to take every bit of the year once it's turned over.
Right. So we're probably talking roughly 2.5 years.
I would say
if we're
3.
lucky.
I would say 3 years.
Okay, 3.
That's just my
Yeah,
opinion.
I go back to my original question. That's, I really think we need to look at, whatever we can do to solidify that existing building, because you don't want to have to deal with that, having a problem in the middle of that.
Yeah, and Kenny and I have talked about some simple sort of Band-Aid solutions, replacing some of the purlins, without doing a true sort of forensic analysis of how much is the steel's corroded, whatever. I mean, there's some obvious stuff that, we can do just to shore the roof up that shouldn't be too expensive that, when we go to tear the building down, we don't feel like we waste a lot of money just for a 2 or 3 year build.
But it would be something. You would have an idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about maybe $50,000, but
But
not
that's
hundreds
not
of
part
thousands.
of your scope of work here.
Not
No.
not in that budget, that estimate for the new building. I mean, I think it would be worth looking at timing wise. I don't know if we would want to wait until we send out the bid and have the contractor doing one building, do the other. I would think we would want to get, what we can get fixed.
Yeah,
as
it
quickly
seems
as we
like you
can.
give to the metal building company and, figure out how to best spend some dollar
Right.
amount to just short things up to be sure you don't have a problem.
Right.
Sort of along those lines, Mr. Jones, but this future building, so we don't kind of run into this problem again, what are you anticipating the structure to be of this? I know the tanks would be a concrete, but is there some salt repellent type material that will have in place to prolong the lifetime of the building? Just does
Well, our intent is to build it basically how we did the sea turtle exhibit. So it has the same kind of environment, same sort of structure. We epoxy coated everything. Before anything was enclosed, all the steel was encased with epoxy. We have epoxy floors. I don't really think that the existing building was intended to be a 20-year building with.
And we're gonna have 100% makeup air. So what that does is completely exchanges the air
Right.
with outside air continuously, rather than recirculating it on a traditional HVAC system.
So basically, the sea turtle has a concrete tank. It'll be kind of the same system we used on that picture.
Thank you.
Just a question. Cost. The cost of living has to be you okay that they was based on current plans?
Yes.
Yes.
I gave them everything they used to produce the cost, so they don't have the 3 or 4 other versions that we
Well,
kind of got.
we had 2 or 3 different
Yeah.
versions.
No.
I want to make sure, because the one I was looking at said 10,000 square feet, now big. So.
Yeah, 15,800.
Make sure that what you're doing.
Is this?
I don't remember off the
is
top of my head what
Is
it was.
this likely going to be the largest version? Or is
Yes.
it going to grow as it gets colder?
But the estimate was based off the most recent version.
And just to confirm that 240, that's like just a fixed fee for that whole.
Correct. Right.
Great. Any other questions for Mr. Helms? Thank you, Greg. Just curious, Mr. Shrout, for the additional 5 million that we're going to need to actually build this, where was that money coming from?
We have the 7.5 million in revenue bond. And, we're not asking for that money tonight. We're just asking for the money for the design, and we'll come back with a better figure in the months to come.
Yeah. As a rule of order, if you ever ask us for more than $1 million, put a tie on first.
Except for Kenny, he's got to wear where the chainmail sits.
Kenny to
Yeah,
wear
I took off the baseball cap.
tie, no hat.
That's right.
Yeah,
I've moved to approval.
and there better be some extra Chick-fil-A sauce. Okay, we have a proper motion and a second for item number 3. Let's vote, please.
OJ?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Emery? Yes. Murray?
Yes.
Rowe?
Yes.
Chairbox.
Yes. Item 4, approve resolution number 79, a resolution amending the annual appropriations by $240,000 in account number 90923-5392 for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 to fund the authority's contract for professional design services for the large animal holding and aquarium administrative office building awarded to GS Helms and Associates in the amount of $240,000, page 56. Mr. Salceda, good evening, sir.
Thank you, Chair, members of the authority. This is our standard procedure when we need to appropriate money that wasn't originally appropriated in the budget. So this is a supplemental appropriation. Our standard template resolution kind of details where the expense is being booked, which is our capital items department. And if you have any questions,
So Laura, is this coming out of 7.5? Okay, so we have to provide some additional paperwork or whatever to somebody? Because I thought weren't there some strings to that we couldn't spend it without?
so the money is currently held in trust at Bank First, separately from like Bank First here. And it's just a different process where if we receive an invoice from Mr. Helms, say it's one of X amount of invoices, we fill out a form and send it to the bank, and then they pay him directly. Or if we decide to pay him directly, then we just submit the form and reimburse ourselves. That's just the difference in the process.
We did not have any that budgeted formally for this project prior to tonight. So that's great.
Yes.
Any other questions? Very well. Motion. Proper motion second for item 4. Let's vote, please.
Boucher,
Yes.
Bonds,
Yes.
Montgomery. Yes. Murray. Yes. Rowe.
Yes.
Chair Bach.
Yes. Authorization. Number 5, authorization to move forward with a plan to purchase a carousel. I guess we can do it after this. We have one.
Thank you, Mayor. So what we're asking for today, and I'm sorry if there's any confusion, is basically just to move forward with the bidding process for the carousel. So I know it's been kind of confusing, but just to kind of recap what's happened and where we are now. So in the beginning, I kind of came to y'all with a shotgun approach of a bunch of different ideas of projects, right? And then we kind of started narrowing it down to a few. The one project that we knew is a must is obviously the shark quarantine. So, and after that, so the evolution is as Greg's starting to get some numbers in, we basically thought, let's put in the offices as well with the shark quarantine, get some of those numbers. Well, obviously that's gotten much bigger. So for me, my ultimate goal, there's only so many pieces of pie that we can use. My ultimate goal is to have a state-of-the-art shark quarantine, whether there's offices or not, and some entertainment-based revenue-generating item that's substantial. And I think that's a healthy balance of infrastructure and moving forward with our facility and with guest experience as well as generating revenue. So basically where we're at, we ironed it down to these 2 projects, and we abandoned some of the projects for right now. We decided that the miniature golf, being a very large project with a lot of possible pitfalls or changes or budget blowouts, and that is a lot more likely with something like a miniature golf course rather than a carousel, which is a pretty straightforward deal. We know what it'll cost. It gets fabricated, it gets delivered. There's some infrastructure work done to the building, and you start tearing tickets. And so it's a safer bet while doing a very large project like the shark quarantine. So that's kind of where we're at. It's just settling on 2 projects and seeing if we can do both. And so Greg's been working pretty hard getting us some estimates and numbers, which you have already seen. The carousel, where we're at as far as just estimates right now, is about $600,000 for the carousel itself, and that's delivered and installed. We got about $100,000 worth of infrastructure, actually about $71,000 of true infrastructure, which would be the concrete work, footings and whatnot, where the carousel has to be set, which is in the Great Hall between the 4 columns. Also the trenching to bring electrical, as well as getting the electrical service run. And then patching the epoxy floor wherever there's concrete cut that's exposed. And finally, the extra 30,000 to make it 100,000 of the structure is to go ahead and install those glass doors in the back of the Great Hall. That way there's exposure to the deck and to the playground, and it kind of all flows. And also that it's to reduce bottlenecks when we're busy and during events like 4th of July. Also to add a wheelchair or mechanically operated door for wheelchairs. So we've got the 600,000 for the carousel, the 100,000 for the infrastructure, and then to kind of beautify the room and make it not a beige room, and you know, to match the carousel and to kind of make it a little bit more of a well-rounded project, to spruce up the Great Hall, another 100,000, and it's for painting the Great Hall and some are you know, architectural work for the columns, say, or some props and things of that nature to make it feel like you're in an aquarium. It's not a deluxe overhaul of the Great Hall because that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to do something like that, but I don't think that's necessary at this point. So, so that's kind of where we're at. And so what we're asking is the next step is to get some absolute real numbers, which is to go to bid. We're not asking, you know, for money. We're asking to go to bid for these two projects and then see what it is. I already pretty much know what we're going to be doing right after that. And then we're going to sit down and see, do we trim some fat here or there, or what do we, you know, how can we safely get a shark quarantine and a carousel within budget? And in my opinion, the offices are great. And it's just my opinion, but I don't feel like they're a huge priority. If it means not having a carousel, which is going to be a huge revenue generating item, and it's going to add, what it's going to add to the aquarium and to the guest experience, I think is super important. So, so basically my request is just to go to bid and get us closer to the mark.
Any questions for Mr. Alexopoulos?
Okay, what kind of, does that entail any costs to do that? I mean, obviously you probably need to look at the infrastructure side of the now too. So would you get more design?
Yeah, so the estimate for the infrastructure, again, is for the true infrastructure to make it even possible, is about $70,000, and that's the concrete work and electrical work. And then the other 30,000 to add the doors. This would, and correct me if I'm wrong, this would need to go, we would need to be separated into two bids. We'd have the bid for the carousel and then a bid for the construction work. Obviously, the carousel guy won't be doing that.
So my question is, do you need funds to execute that work?
So
Not to build it, but
So-
to bid it and all.
So
that.
Greg, the estimated fee for Greg to facilitate all this is about $12,000.
Wait a minute, are you asking for, what is the cost of the RFP process?
Well, yeah, the cost to get to the end of, yes, I've gone through and here's what we need to do. Here's, you know, before he comes approval, just like we talked about the 240. You know, I'm not that concerned with $12,000. I mean, I just was asking, so I had to.
That's the best is my knowledge. But feel free to chime in.
What's the $12,000 for?
The design of
Design.
Of the-
infrastructure necessary
Okay,
for the
basically the
carousel.
footings, et cetera.
We've already.
For the
pretty much
design,
moved
not for
forward
the
on
actual.
that.
Okay.
I mean, as I understand that, that's a very good question, because we did approve something for that process
Yeah, yes.
previous, but the 12,000 is sunk cost. I mean, if we don't do it, that's gonna be out of pocket from some budget. And that's what, I mean, it wasn't mentioned, because I personally thought we were trying to go through the whole thing tonight, so, which I had some problems with, but.
Yeah. And that was my fault. I it wasn't exactly 100% clear.
And I think the goal tonight is just to talk about, this is what we think it'll cost. We have a pretty good estimate based on the carousel companies we've talked with. We've already had Greg do some work looking at what the infrastructure costs would be. So we're just coming before the JAA tonight to say, this is kind of what we found out about this project. What Kenny didn't necessarily get into was the revenue side of this. And that's where I think, we've been talking for years now, and thankfully, last year there was no subsidy required. We had a surplus in operating revenue. But if I look at the shark ride that, was just kind of, $25,000 that Kenny kind of thought would be a good idea as a test case. We put that in, only one person can ride it. Only a certain type of person is even going to want to get on that thing and ride it. And it costs $5. Well, in 1 year, that generates $50,000. So 10,000 people who came through the door rode that thing of the 342,000 that came through the door for the year. So that's a 3% capture rate on a super specific, customer base. The fish food, we've been pushing that and making sure we always have food available, making sure we always have a volunteer staff member to sell the food. And we brought in about $300,000 in revenue in fish food sales last year. At $5 a cup, that breaks down to about 60,000 guests. Of the 342,000 guests bought a cup of fish food. The limiting factor with that is, I have a 16-month-old. I go to the aquarium. He can't feed, he can't ride the bull shark. He can't feed the fish food. He can get on a carousel, but you have other, usually it's a kid who's wanting to feed the fish. And so at $300,000, that's 60,000 people who bought a cup, and that's about a 17% capture rate. So 17% of the people who walk through the door buy a cup of fish food. The VR machine that we installed, or that we have a revenue share agreement with, we brought in, I think, $266,000 last year at $8 a ride. That comes out to, I believe, 30,000 riders and a capture rate of about 10%. And I think that of anything that we've offered, we also have a hurricane machine. The capture rate, I think, is less than 1%. But of all the possible options of something to do for whether it's someone with an infant, someone with a 5-year-old, anybody, and you're going to capture adults too, riding with kids, I think is a carousel. And we had talked about a $3 charge. So it's going to be less than the VR. It's going to be less than the fish food, going to be less than the shark ride. And yet you can get something like, 18 to 22 people on it in one spin. And we've done the numbers. We think super conservatively, we can capture if we just capture what we capture with fish food, which I think is, that if we're only getting 18% of the people through the door, I would consider it a failure. But we'd still be making significantly more than the shark ride. And when I just think that this thing, every zoo in America has a carousel, and they have one for a reason, because you only need 1 or 2 people to staff it. And when you're a family entertainment, there's nothing more wholesome than a carousel that literally anyone of any age can ride. I think the capture rate will be closer to 30 or 40% potentially of the people who come through the building. And that's something that, I'm, getting in anecdotally, having a 16-month-old and trying to think constantly of things to go do with a kid this age. I can go to the Science Museum in Oklahoma City and he can walk around and play with all this, touch all this different stuff. When the Science Museum or when the Children's Museum opens at the Gathering Place, we have to remember that's going to be competition for us. And I think that the thought is, what else can we add that is a guest experience for any age kid that maybe can't even appreciate the fish yet? And I think that, having something like the carousel would aid in the guest experience, just like the people obviously want to feed the fish. If we get 60,000 people buying a cup of food, we know that this adds to their experience. Same with the VR machine, but I think that this has the broadest audience of potential customers, But I think that we need to be thinking about in the future, are there things we can add that are educational in nature that maybe they're not an exhibit? Maybe it's something about, water tables that, show that how streams and rivers work, and kids can put boats in the water table and see how it goes and meanders down, and something else for kids to do that takes up their time, that extends their stay at the facility or gets them to come back. And I think that to me, this is hopefully, even, if this board decides not to invest in the carousel, which I think would pay for itself rather quickly, I think we need to be thinking about what else can we do to add to that experience to make people want to come back more than once or twice a year. It's like, oh, there's these different interactive activities to do that don't necessarily cost us a significant amount of operating revenue. I mean, every new exhibit, it's more maintenance, and even they're wonderful exhibits and everything, but I think that, are there other educational things we can offer that are interactive that we don't have to feed, we don't have to clean necessarily to the same level of the fish tanks, and I kind of went off on that, but I think that, how can we appeal to the broadest audience? And I think it starts with potentially the carousel, and it being not very expensive, a $3 ticket, as opposed to some of our other experiences.
So Kenny, this sort of along those lines, obviously we want the aquarium to generate revenue, but we also are thinking about future, what other things we can do. One of the things that kind of popped up in my head is that this carousel, I'm not necessarily against the carousel, and that they're fun to ride and that it's making money, awesome. But I also know that that Great Hall, although it's not used all the time, if we put a big carousel in there, that eliminates that ability to use that. So we wouldn't have been able to have the governor's ball, things like that. And so I just want to be careful about not, doing something now that keeps us from doing something later. And I'm wondering, this just popped in my head, so I'm just rethinking here. If the large aquarium, the large animal holding facility, if we did that first, that was the big focus, and maybe we can do both of them. I don't know. I just think we need to be fiscally responsible. I mean, that's our job. If we did that with the offices, and we move all of the offices and conference room from where they are now over there, that frees up this big area just off of the cafeteria that could be easily accessible from the Great Hall to put a big carousel in. And we still have the Great Hall to use whenever we want to. That's just a thought.
It's only
Right.
one story, and your offices are only one story.
Yeah, it's only one story. And then you're also not getting the impact that the carousel is going to provide and the visibility. So you're going to capture more people with it being a Great Hall. It is a trade-off. As far as events, if we're looking at it as revenue, it will interfere with some of the events that we do get as far as private events, like certain weddings and things of that nature. But to put it in perspective, after it's all said and done and we pay the light bill, all of our events together, every single one of them, at the end of the day, we make about the same amount as that bull shark ride.
And so if we bring in $200,000 to $250,000 in revenue from events, the cost of the employees, the cost of everything else related to the linens and everything, we come away with about $50,000. And I still think that you can still have the majority of the events at the facility. And I think that, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but to say fiscally responsible or conservative, if I'm looking at what's the best use of money, is it sitting in the bank making 0.015 interest, or is it investing in something that will no doubt pay for itself in 4 or 5 years? And now you have something that's generating revenue probably for a very long time.
Right.
And I view, and this is something that I think we should probably do at some point. It's like, what is our long-term vision for the facility? Because I think it would be, once we get to be financially sustainable and have a surplus every year, we can say, do we want an event set, like an actual event
And I
center?
think that's where.
Well,
like,
again, not to be argumentative, but if it's better to invest the funds unless the priority is a large animal facility that after we've invested funds, we don't have the funds to complete. So that's what I want to be careful about, is spending $800,000 now when we need it for this large animal thing that we've got to have. And we come up and we're like, well, shoot, we're $1 million short.
And that's,
we have that 800 back.
and that's,
And I mean, that's right. And so I'm not suggesting that we don't put it in the great hole. I'm just saying, as part of you thinking through
Oh,
this,
sure.
and looking at this, are there other options that maybe, with large animal thing being, in my opinion, the priority
right.
first? Because if we have dead animals, nobody's going to come to care of it.
yeah,
So, we got to have that thing, and it's about to fall down. So let's do that, and let's look at other ways that we wouldn't shoot.
Right.
Maybe we take the bull riding thing, we put that where the offices are. I don't know.
and I mean, and maybe, again, so we have 7.5 million in the revenue bond funds. I mean, I think that we are really failing if we come in and we're anything like 6.5 million. I mean, I think that there's things that need to be trimmed off, even if it comes to that amount. And beyond that, I mean, I believe, Robert, we have 4 million in fund balance at the moment in the operating account. So, I mean, we have an extremely healthy fund balance that if we're not proposing, I mean, I guess we're trying to consider all that, and we don't have a funding recommendation at the moment. We're just saying we have this idea, we want to keep moving forward.
Right. So this risk doesn't concern you right now? The risk that he's talking about, you don't feel the same risk of potentially sitting back in 7 months and wondering if we could have that $1 million back?
Not at all.
Okay.
I sit and look at the revenue every single evening, and for the past 2 months now, I see 2019 revenue and 2021 revenue getting closer and closer together. I mean, we had the boomerang effect where everybody had to stay home. We had a record spring, a record summer, but people have come to the aquarium and they've had a great time, and they're probably not coming back for a while. And so, I mean, I think there's a difference now this first quarter of the fiscal year, July to date, of about $200,000 from 2021 to 2019. So we're still ahead $200,000, but we were ahead, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. And so my concern is that if we don't have new things that we're offering, and especially something that actually generates revenue, that we're just going to fall behind. And we have the Gathering Place opening up the Children's Museum. I mean, that's real competition for people who want to say, well, what am I doing today? Or what membership am I going to buy? Because some people can't afford, every membership, or can't afford to go to every facility. And I think that we have to be thinking about, what the competition is.
So right now you're in the mode of investing.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's all right.
Well,
That's good enough.
I don't know if this is the right reason, but I don't think this is stupid, but because you've answered key question for me, was that we're not voting on this tonight, which
No.
But I think realistically, there is an opportunity cost. We don't know what it is. You may, we don't. As trustees, I don't. Anyway, not having advanced things in the or the trade ostensibly. We're 20 years into it. There are going to be other things that require, whether we like it or not, there's things that are going to require money to keep these things as we all want it to be. And we probably eliminated let the large animal quarantines go too long. And I was here, we voted on it the first time, we wouldn't have those charts that tax record hadn't been built. So there's trade-offs. It's everything we're talking about. And I'm not suggesting that we're not looking at these things. I just want to make sure that we're taking our time Well, not saying we got $7 million, let's make it as fast as we can.
Understood.
Yeah. And I mean,
We want real numbers and so opening an envelope is gonna give us some real numbers. And I don't foresee us going, wow, this is great, we're gonna do them both. I mean, there's gonna, you know, Mr. Bonds, I mean, what you said is exactly what I don't want to happen. And we're not gonna let that happen. And so, you know, what one of the factors that isn't a must, but is a huge chunk of money is those offices. So it's not like we're saying that just to build the Sharp Quarantine is gonna cost so much that we may not be able to do the carousel. No, we may not, in my opinion, we may not be able to do the offices.
Okay, and I was arguing, I don't want to speak for Gary, but there's things that you could do in the process of stubbing everything off, so those offices would still be a reality, maybe not the day you finish.
That is the case.
And that is,
Yeah.
and that is part of the option,
Yeah.
is to do the shell.
Yeah. We did talk about going back, and if the offices don't become a reality the next year or two, the construction will accommodate future growth.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll say this,
That would be a big miss if we,
right.
yeah, okay.
And just to kind of recap a little bit about what Chris was saying, that is a bold statement for me. That carousel will be the number 2 revenue generating line item for the aquarium.
Okay, drop the mic. Don't say anything.
I believe that.
That's it. You're done.
100%.
We'll talk about selling.
It's gonna
Done.
outdo the
No.
fish food.
That's
It's gonna outdo the gift
That's
shop.
over. I've lost my interest.
It's gonna outdo it all. I can almost guarantee
And
it.
Mr. Rowe, I want to tell you one thing. We had an executive strategy session with senior members of staff and council, and we learned about each other's personality styles. This guy here, hard charger, yeah, let's go invest. That guy over there, total opposite. He's trying to hoard our money and save it. So the only good news is he's trying to save it. He works for him and he's trying to spend it, and he loves spending money, I think. So we do have a balance, and with you two on the anchors here, I think we're good. But I would agree with Mr. Shrout that we don't have to spend this money just because we have it. But it's probably not doing us a lot of good sitting in an account earning next to nothing either. And at this,
Unless we know of other things that are gonna be.
Yes.
That money.
that's true. So, and that's where we're going to trust these three, that they're going to tell us in the next 3 years that these are the other things that potentially could fall apart or fall through the roof, that we're going to need money to repair those things. So.
Let me just, we would need to make this money. Chris, you need to do anything for that,
No. Yeah.
So then really, Kenny, you're just asking for, shall I say, acquiescence to go ahead and do, further exploration on.
Yeah.
Right. I'd like to come back to you with numbers that are so real that if you want to do it right now, we can. And because I think it's the evolution. I mean, we're getting closer and closer. And that's why it seems a little bit confusing and a little bit discombobulated. It isn't. It's taking to get us closer and closer. And I'm not saying that we're going to, necessarily be able to have it all. I mean, we may have some sticker shock.
The purpose of this is to let the board know what we're exploring and say, this is what we found out. We're trying to keep the communication open, that we've been just to let you know, we've been working on this. We hope to continue working on it to get firmer numbers. And
well, that's why I'm asking you, what authorization is being asked for from us?
Just to continue working on this concept.
So to go out and do a
So
RFQ.
that's.
Yeah,
Well, there's no
we're
commitment.
just trying to get some buy-in that
Yeah.
can we continue. We've been working on this. Can we please just continue working on it?
There's no purchase commitment with an
For
RFQ.
instance,
Well, let me just say, I appreciate that explanation. I would say it was not clear, in
Yeah.
my opinion, the way it was presented. So
Yeah.
I came in last night for vacation, I read it, and I thought, we're proving something. I mean, I'd like to know.
Well, I wanted to be.
We like
really vague
to hit you
because-
up with these when you come
Yeah.
back from trips, so you're not prepared.
But I like the idea of keeping us informed and transparent through the whole process. No problem with that. Just wanted to make sure that we're getting ahead of ourselves.
And again, the big purpose is why, we need a group to go forward is simply because half the people here may say, I don't care what it costs, I don't like a carousel. And I'd rather not continue down that path for no reason.
Okay, so I guess I'll move for approval, let Kenny proceed and figure out what the numbers are.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a proper motion, a second for item number 5. Let's vote, please.
OJ,
Yes.
Bonds,
Yes.
Montgomery, Murray,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Fairclough.
Yes. Is that like a 5.5? Yes.
Check that there.
Item, staff reports. Kenny, I would ask you, the company out of Australia,
Yes.
I don't want to miss that.
Oh, no. Well, you're gonna wear the suit.
Yeah. he's gonna-
That's fine. If you got people, if you have an experimental suit and people are being bit, I want to watch
Yeah.
it.
We're gonna have two people, one will draw for the city.
Yeah,
Because you need to control.
that's got to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
That's why you're exempt.
Anything anything you need to talk about, not for the sake of time?
So how much time do we have? Are we up?
There are a couple of 3 minutes,
Okay.
and then we'll,
So yeah, just, we've had some, Ann Money has done a really, has done a great job recently. She's, with OAF, they've landed some serious money from Fish Friends, $30,000 from Phillips 66. George Kaiser, with a $10,000 donation. So that's amazing. We filmed an episode of a travel detective called Hidden Gem. And it features other, certain, kind of entertainment based or some really unique things in Tulsa. And so our aquarium was picked for that show. We hosted Kevin Hearn and State Representative Lonnie Sims and Sheila Dills. I gave them a tour of the aquarium. Let's see here. This spring, we saw our highest a day of attendance at over 5,000 visitors on March 21st, which is pretty amazing.
that's since you started Ultra or historically ever?
Well, since we started Altru,
Okay.
but being here for as long, I've never seen it.
Okay, so it
Yeah,
still feels
I
like.
mean, I would,
Okay.
it's up there.
Okay.
What's that, Art?
I said, I don't think there's been too many of those.
No, okay. So we're on the same page on that one for sure. Okay. And then Splash will be held on the 26th of February. So that'll be the first time since COVID that we've had a major fundraising event, OAF. And the shark suit is pretty neat. This company, just a real quick hash, this company has developed a shark-proof, so to speak, suit that's flexible and can be worn in a way that chainmail can't, which is very bulky and heavy, as you can imagine. So they're trying to basically create an armored wetsuit. And so pretty neat stuff, cutting edge. I'm assuming there's layers of, it's all proprietary, but we've seen the construction of it. I'm sure there's layers, most likely of Kevlar. But the coolest part about it is the underlying skeleton of interlocking plates that it allows for, human movement in your joints and everything. And it's almost like origami. And it's super neat. They've tested it on great white sharks. They've tested it on tiger sharks, but they have not tested it on a bull shark. So just like NOAA comes and we do bite tests for them, they're gonna come and they're gonna send a sleeve, and we still have the apparatus that we do testing, the boom, and we're going to devise a way to coax one of our sharks to tear into that sleeve. So I think that'll be pretty neat. And our clownfish are on exhibit. The exhibit's not on exhibit, but the clownfish are in the exhibit. And that particular exhibit of the new project is pretty much done. It's stunning. If y'all have a chance to come, I'd love to show it to you. And it's a wall of anemones with 400 clownfish, and it's just mesmerizing. And I showed Chris, and he says, you know, this is my new favorite exhibit at the aquarium. Honest to God. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff. We're gonna be jamming. This is gonna be a great year. I guarantee you. On octopus, yes. We have one coming, I believe, next week. I'm not 100%, but we do have one that's been collected and will be being delivered. But our guy, you know, he was our oldest lived octopus, and he also got the largest of any of our others. And, you know, they only live, that species, 3 to 5 years max. And when we get them, they're already a couple of years old. If not, they'd be this big. So, you know, and it's just something that I think next time, maybe, you know, we saw this coming for 6 months. We were just, well, how's this old man still going, you know? And you can tell because when they can't heal when they have scratches and stuff, and that's one of the telltale signs. And I think maybe next time when we know ahead of time like that, maybe it would be a good thing to announce it. Come see our octopus while you can, blah, 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 explain the life history of an octopus and that kind of thing might be good for the public. All right.
Excellent. Any comments from trustees or Mr. Stroud?
Just one quick comment. Bank First has a commercial about Jinx. And at the very end of it is the Oklahoma Aquarium.
Hey, very cool.
Oh, management from Georgia Aquarium was here yesterday. They came here to see our beaver exhibit. So the president of their you know, animal collection, and there's three of them from Georgia Aquarium. They fell in love with the aquarium. They just thought it was just the neatest thing, and yeah, they came all the way to look at our beaver exhibit. They're thinking about doing one, and they're limited in space, and so yeah, pretty neat stuff. All right,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Any motions to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion, a second for adjournment. Let's vote, please.
OJ?
Yes.
Bond?
Yes.